Hi, this is Maggie Goldman, your Fulton County Commission District 1 Democratic nominee. And I just want to walk you through what you would need to do to file an appeal that would be due on Friday, July 31st in Fulton County. I'm going to walk you through a few of the resources in my website. So we just did our last Zoom meeting, appeal meeting today. So I'm going to change this up a little, but I will keep this download Fulton click-by-click appeal guide. So I'm going to click on that. I wonder if that's going to be, it should still be in the form. Okay. So this is going to be tell you exactly how to set up an account and file an appeal with Fulton County. And it'll answer some questions for you about options that you'll need to pick um, as you submit the appeal. So we'll go through one of those today when I do mine, but just to give you an idea of what you should get out of that PDF there. All right. So then we also have understanding the 3% cap. The whole video on this. It has all of the 5 cities in it. And basically, what happens here is I'm going to show you this Johns Creek example that is going to come up. Um, so basically, what happens is your homestead exemption credits adjust to accommodate for a higher value. So you can see here my value went from 650 to 829, so increase over $100,000. But because the homestead exemption credits, see how low they are here, like 30,000, 15, the homestead exemption credits here have increased to accommodate for the fact that there was an increase in the assessed value, which is the 40% of the value. So you can see that the net taxable for the county only went from 230 to 238. This is where that 3% cap comes into place. The 238 is about 3% more than the 230. And then the 238 is multiplied by the millage rate to get the taxes. So you can see that last year in this example, I paid $2,040 to Fulton County, and I'm only paying 2,114, which is not even $100 more, even though the house went up over $100,000. That's how the cap works. You can see here in Johns Creek, the taxable was 245, and now it is 253. So that's where the 3% cap happens in the assessed value, and then that number is multiplied by the millage rate, and you can see that I paid 976 in this year to Johns Creek, and the following year I only paid $1,010. That is how the cap works. It also works for schools in Fulton County. So the schools here was 258. You can see it only went up to 266. And then multiplied by the millage rate, I paid 4,447 the year before, and I only went up a little over maybe $150, even though the house went up over $100,000 in value. In fact, it was like $150,000 in value. You can see the total from the prior year was $7,617, and this year it's only about $300 more total. This is how the cap works. And there is an example of this in each of the cities here, and a video that walks you through what I just did. Because if you remember the tax assessments this year, they have been devoid of any real value. So here's the current notice of assessment. You can tell it doesn't have any information about homestead exemption credits that you could multiply by the millage rate and estimate your taxes. It only has this estimated savings number, which doesn't really help us if we don't know what we're saving up. Like what was the total amount before, so that you could estimate your taxes. Last year's at least looked like this, where there was a homestead evaluation exemption value that I could then get the net taxable. So this basically is this 331 minus these numbers. I get these numbers, I multiply these by these numbers, and I could at least estimate the taxes myself. Because that is gone, I created worksheets here for each of the cities where you can put in your own information from your tax assessment and estimate your taxes to get an idea of whether you think you should even appeal at all. So I'm going to show you the Johns Creek one. Okay, so here's my assessment notice. I'm going to use this 966 800 value, and I'm going to use this savings value. Okay, and then I'm going to just show you where I'm going to get the taxes so that you'll know where I got that from before I switch over to the other window. So I just hit that tax info button on the tax record. And we'll see here that this 8163 is the amount that I paid last year in taxes. Okay. So let's switch over to my sheet with the Johns Creek numbers. Okay. So now this is the sample of the Johns Creek. I am going to put in here the numbers from my assessment notice. I'm going to put 966 800 here. And if you remember, I'm going to come down here and put my savings from the exemption notice. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and put in that taxes that I found from last year. So that was 8163. Okay. So 8163. So you can tell I put the value in here. It gave me the 40%, which is the assessed value. It put those here, and then it multiplied those by the current millage rates, which is the best way we can to estimate. But it didn't include any homestead exemption credits because they didn't include them. And instead, what they did is they gave us a savings. So what I did is I took the total of what it could be, the highest amount, which would be this 11,547, and I subtracted this estimated savings, 3,144, and that came to this 8,403. And you can see my last year's was only maybe $250 less. So even though my property went up from $829,000 to 966, which was again almost $150,000 difference, maybe $125,000 difference, I'm still only paying $250 total dollars more. That is how the cap helps. So if I was going to appeal, I would not expect to save very much money at all. You would just be appealing for the sake of appealing. There might be something you want to fix about your property record card. Maybe you just want to appeal because you feel like you want to appeal. That's fine. But I want you to be clear about what your estimated taxes are so that you can make a fair decision about whether you should appeal or not. Okay, so we're going to go back to this, and then I'm going to show you how to use the comparable sales tool to determine what you might ask for. So you didn't see me go to this site, so let me start over here. So this is just fultonassessor.org, and it you go to the property search link, and you can type in any of these, owner name, location, address, or parcel number, but it's easy to just put in the address. So let's put in, it's Stony Ridge Lane. So this is how you get to the tax record in order to look at the property record card or the assessment notice or the tax information here. But what I'm going to do now is go to this comp search button. So you want to leave most of this alone. The neighborhood code is 1267. I'm going to leave that alone because they want you to stay within your neighborhood code. You want only qualified sales. So we are going to click on those. And then the most important thing you do here is you need to make sure these are only 2025 sales. So you cannot, the 2026 values are based on 2025 sales. So you don't want to use the sales within the past year. You want only 2025 sales. So you need to change this to be January 1, 2025 and 12/31, 2025. Then I'm going to hit search. So you can see up here the subject property is listed. This is my property. You can tell the value here, and the price per square foot is 235. You can see my square footage here. You see the year built, all of this. So I'm gonna go down here. So these are the four sales. I always like to sort the sales by square foot from lowest to highest whenever I get on here. So these are the four qualified sales that happened in my neighborhood. So if I'm trying to make a case that my property is worth less than 966 and less than $235 a square foot, that means I need to look for properties that are also less than $235 a square foot. Now you can see this one is 278 a square foot, so that's not going to help me. 261 a square foot, that was not going to help me. But this is 237 a square foot, which is probably close to, what they did for my house. Although my house is actually more like this per square foot. So it says it's 4103 and this is 4147. So I could just pick, if I was just going to pick, because you just need to pick. You just need to pick a value to put on your appeal. I could put 865 because I think that's the closest to it, and the price per square foot is clearly lower. But for the sake of argument, I usually like to try and get at least 3 to 5 comps. In this case, I'm really just going to pick the two that are the lower ones, right? So I'm going to say 237 and the 208. So I'm going to check them over here and then open up this comparable properties report. And this is going to show the two comparable properties that I picked and my subject property. Um, oh, so that was right. I remember this was an unqualified sale. So I'm not sure. We picked qualified sales only, and it still included this one. So for whatever reason, it's saying that this Rainbow Row Court is not a qualified. So you see how there's little zeros here. So I'm not going to be able to use this one for my comps because they're just not going to accept this unqualified sale, even though I don't know why it's an unqualified sale. So we're left with just this one, which is honestly the one I wanted anyway, right? The 865 and the price per square foot was 203, 209. So I'm just gonna put on my assessment notice 865. And generally speaking, I try to stay within, it's very unlikely you're going to get a value that is lower than your prior year value. And my prior year value was 829. So asking for 865 is not too bad. It's within the difference between these two. Okay, so now that I know what number I want to ask for, I need to go to the portal where they have the appeals. So we're going to go to appeals here. And then if you use my click-by-click guide, you'll be able to figure out how to set up the account, but it's not that difficult to do. So I'm just going to show you how to log in and file this appeal. Okay, so yes, let's save that password because apparently I did not. Okay, so Fulton County Appeals. So we are going to go to Appeals, Residential and Commercial Property. And then we're going to begin filing. I'm going to get my parcel ID from here. And I'm going to put it here. And it says do not enter dashes or spaces. So I'm going to remove those. And I'm going to hit search. I'm going to find our property and I'm going to hit start filing. I'm going to verify this information. That is correct. If you check if it's an agent of a property. So you're going to pick that you're the owner. And I mean, I'm an owner, so I'm going to pick the owner. But if I was filing on behalf of somebody else, I would put agent, which I have done, but I try not to do it too often. owner email. So I am going to put my email in here and my phone. And I'm gonna put, verify these other items, hit next. Appeal information. So you almost never want to click this homestead exemption denied. I think this only applies if like you had applied and it didn't show up or something. So I just pick no here. So choose all the grounds, appeal grounds that apply below. So you're most often just going to choose value here. We feel like the value is too high and we want it to be something else. I think you can click any of these you want. Like you could pick uniformity if you already knew you had a uniformity case, but you often may not. So value is fine. You only need to do that one. And then appeals process. So you want to select Board of Equalization, appeal to the County Board of Equalization. This arbitration and hearing officer are for different types of properties. I would just use Board of Equalization. And then here you put your opinion of the value. So I'm going to do 865 that we picked from the comps that we looked at. So here, the 85% versus the 100% value. So if you choose the 85% option, it will either bill you 85% of the current bill or last year's taxable amount, whichever is lower. So if you're paying a mortgage, I would recommend that you do the 100%. Let the mortgage pay the tax bill, and then if you get a reduction, you can get a refund back to you. If you pick the 85% and you have a mortgage, they're going to pay the cheaper version, and then any excess bill would come to you, and nobody wants like an extra bill. Now, if you do not have an escrow and your mortgage is not paying your taxes, you may want to choose the 85% option because then you will outlay the least amount of money up front. And then when they send you the remaining of the bill, you'll have had time to make up, save up for it or whatever you choose to do with it. So that's how I would choose those two options. So I am just going to pick the 100% because I actually don't expect to save any money anyway. So I just want to pay the bill. Virtual or in person. I prefer in-person hearings. I like to go down there, but you can pick virtual if you want to. So reason for appeal comments, so you do not need to put anything here, but you can choose to put something here if you'd like. And you can also choose to put some attachments, right? But I'm just, just for the sake of, I'm just gonna say, the comparable sale closest to my property. Um, sold for 65, whatever. But you don't have to put anything at all. Because they're not even gonna care. They're not even gonna look at it most likely. If you had something you wanted to attach, a PDF of say, if you wanted to take this and download this, I could do that. Um, you could upload that if you wanted to, or upload anything, that's a file they're willing to accept. But again, it's not necessary. Okay. And then I'm gonna hit next. It's gonna ask me if I'd like to submit. Um, sometimes, I mean, you don't have to. You can just print draft. This will give you like a copy of what you submitted in case you want that, but I don't need that. And I think that you can look it up after anyway. Um, but let's see. So this is the print version. So I'm gonna get rid of that. So I'm just going to hit submit. Yes. And that is all you need to do. Now you can print the filing here too. Just there was that draft. You can also print it here. See the same stuff. But that is all that you need to do before July 31st. We can work on the prep for your BOE hearing at another point. You can always look at my filings to see the one that we just submitted, this one, in case you needed to look at it again. If you have any questions, reach out and let me know. But if not, submit your appeal before Friday, July 31st, if you live in Fulton.